On September 29, 1944, in the small Italian village of Casaglia near Marzabotto, residents gathered in the church of Santa Maria Assunta for morning mass. It was a Friday, and many elderly women came to pray. Children played quietly in the pews while their mothers knelt. The priest, Don Ubaldo Marchioni, stood at the altar leading prayers. Then the doors burst open. German SS soldiers stormed into the church with machine guns. They ordered everyone outside. Don Ubaldo stepped forward, holding a baby he was preparing to baptize, pleading for the soldiers to show mercy. They shot him in the face. He fell, still clutching the infant. The soldiers then herded all 147 people from the church, elderly women, mothers, and children, into the church cemetery. They lined them against the wall and opened fire with machine guns. Bodies fell in waves. A mother tried to shield her 3 children. They all died together. When the shooting stopped, soldiers walked among the corpses, shooting anyone still moving. Then they threw grenades to ensure no one survived. Only one person lived, a woman who hid under the bodies until the soldiers left. This was just the first day of the Marzabotto massacre. For the next 6 days, SS troops would move through the mountains, destroying village after village, killing every civilian they encountered. By October 5, over 770 people were dead, making it the worst SS massacre in Western Europe. If this makes your blood run cold, like this video, subscribe to our channel, and comment below. Share this so these victims are remembered, because what happened at Marzabotto wasn't combat. It was systematic extermination of innocent civilians. Now let me take you back to September 1944 to understand how these mountain villages became killing fields.
To understand the Marzabotto massacre, we must first understand the military situation in Italy in autumn 1944. After Allied forces landed in Sicily in July 1943 and advanced up the Italian peninsula, German forces established defensive lines across Italy to slow the Allied advance. By September 1944, the Germans had retreated to the Gothic Line, a heavily fortified defensive position stretching across northern Italy from the Tyrrhenian Sea to the Adriatic, designed to protect the industrialized north and prevent Allied access to Germany. The mountains of Monte Sole and Monte Rumici, where the villages of Marzabotto, Grizzana Morandi, and Monzuno were located, sat directly on the Gothic Line. These mountains were strategically important, and Hitler personally ordered that the Gothic Line be held at all costs. The area was also home to active Italian partisan groups. After Italy surrendered to the Allies in September 1943, many Italians joined the resistance to fight against the German occupation and the remaining Italian fascists loyal to Mussolini's puppet government in northern Italy. By 1944, partisan groups operated throughout northern Italy, conducting guerrilla warfare, sabotaging railways, ambushing convoys, and attacking isolated German units. The villages in the Marzabotto area provided support to the partisans. Local civilians gave food, shelter, and intelligence to the resistance fighters. The mountains offered excellent cover for partisan operations, and the local population was largely sympathetic to the resistance. This made the area a thorn in the side of German forces trying to maintain control of the Gothic Line. German commanders decided to cleanse the area of partisan support using brutal collective punishment tactics. The order was clear. The entire civilian population in the partisan areas was to be eliminated. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, commander of German forces in Italy, issued a decree on June 17, 1944, holding the general population responsible for acts of resistance and authorizing massive reprisals. The policy was, for every German soldier killed, 50 Italian civilians would be executed, a ratio that, in practice, often became 100 to 1. The operation to destroy the villages around Monte Sole was assigned to the 16th SS Panzergrenadier Division, Reichsfuhrer SS, one of the most notorious units in Italy. This division had already committed numerous atrocities, including the Sant'Anna di Stazzema massacre, where 560 civilians were killed. The commander of the operation at Marzabotto was SS-Sturmbannführer Major Walter Reder, an Austrian Nazi who was a fanatical and brutal officer. On September 29, 1944, approximately 2,500 SS troops, along with Italian fascist auxiliaries, began the operation. They divided into multiple columns and moved through the mountains, systematically sweeping through every village, hamlet, and farmhouse in the area. The operation was codenamed a cleansing action, but was in reality a campaign of systematic mass murder. The first village attacked was Cassalia, a tiny hamlet with just a few dozen residents. As mentioned in the introduction, SS troops entered the village church during morning mass. They shot the priest, Don Ubaldo Marchioni, and forced all 147 people gathered there, mostly elderly women and children, into the cemetery. There, they machine-gunned them all. Among the dead were entire families. The Tonelli family lost 18 members across 3 generations. The youngest victim in the church massacre was just a few months old. After murdering everyone at the church, the SS troops went house to house in Cassalia, searching for anyone who had not been at Mass. They found families hiding in cellars and basements. They threw grenades into these hiding places or shot everyone inside. By the end of the day, Cassalia had been completely depopulated. From Cassalia, the SS moved to the nearby hamlet of Caprara. There, they surrounded a group of farmhouses where approximately 30 people lived. Soldiers went door to door, dragging out entire families. Men, women, children, and elderly were lined up against walls and machine-gunned. Babies were torn from their mothers' arms and shot. One survivor later testified that SS soldiers laughed as they killed the children. In the village of Cirpiano, the SS discovered a group of civilians sheltering in a building. Rather than enter, they simply surrounded the structure and set it on fire. Anyone who tried to escape through windows or doors was shot. Approximately 40 people burned to death inside. On September 30, the second day of the massacre, SS troops expanded their operations to larger villages in the area. One of the main targets was the village of San Martino, located on the slopes of Monte Sole. San Martino had a population of several hundred people, many of whom worked as farmers or in local quarries. As SS columns approached San Martino, some villagers fled into the surrounding forests and mountains, but many stayed, either unable to leave or believing they would be safe if they remained in their homes. They were wrong. SS troops entered San Martino and began systematic house-to-house searches. Soldiers kicked down doors, entered homes, and shot everyone they found inside: men, women, children, infants, and the elderly. They showed no mercy and made no distinction between combatants and civilians. Everyone was a target. In one house, soldiers found a family of 7 hiding in the cellar: grandparents, parents, and 3 children. The entire family was dragged outside, lined up against the wall of their own home, and executed. In another house, a mother tried to hide her newborn baby under a bed. The soldiers found the baby and bayoneted it. At the village school, SS troops found a group of women and children who had gathered there, believing the school would be a safe place. The soldiers herded them into a single classroom, threw grenades through the windows, and then machine-gunned anyone who survived the blast. Approximately 50 people died in the school. The massacre in San Martino continued throughout the day. Bodies piled up in the streets, in houses, and in courtyards. By evening, over 200 people had been killed in San Martino alone. The village was then set on fire. SS troops looted valuables, poured gasoline on buildings, and burned everything to the ground. Meanwhile, another SS column attacked the hamlet of Creda. This was a tiny farming community with only a few dozen residents. SS soldiers surrounded the area and began searching every building. They found a group of approximately 20 people, mostly women, children, and elderly men, sheltering in a barn. The soldiers locked the barn doors from the outside, piled hay and wood around the structure, and set it on fire. As flames engulfed the barn, screams could be heard from inside. Those who tried to break through the doors or windows were shot. Everyone inside burned to death. One of the most horrific incidents occurred at Vaccareccia, a small settlement in the hills. There, SS troops locked 70 civilians, entire families, in a stable. They included elderly people, mothers with infants, and young children. The soldiers threw hand grenades into the stable through the windows and doors. After the explosions, they fired submachine guns into the structure to kill anyone who had survived the blast. Finally, they used flamethrowers to set the stable ablaze, ensuring that no one could survive. All 70 people died, burned, blown apart by grenades, or shot. The stable was completely destroyed, and the entire settlement was burned to the ground. As the massacre continued on October 1 and 2, SS troops moved through more villages: Sperticano, Colulla, Tagliadazza, Colleameno. The pattern was always the same: surround the village, search every building, kill everyone found, burn everything, and move to the next village. The killing was systematic, methodical, and without mercy. Women faced particular horror. Many were raped before being killed. Young girls and teenage women were sexually assaulted by soldiers, often in front of their family members, and then executed. The sexual violence was widespread, though survivors were often too traumatized to speak about it after the war. Children were targeted with special brutality. SS soldiers seemed to take particular pleasure in killing children. Witnesses who survived reported seeing soldiers throwing babies into the air and shooting them like clay pigeons. Others saw soldiers smashing infants' heads against walls. Children who tried to run were chased down and shot for sport. The death toll among children was staggering. Over 200 children under the age of 10 were killed during the massacre, including numerous infants just days or weeks old. One particularly haunting account comes from a survivor who hid in a ditch and watched as SS soldiers entered her neighbor's house. They dragged out a mother and her 3 young children. The soldiers shot the mother first, while the children screamed. Then they shot the children one by one. The oldest was about 8 years old. The youngest was a toddler who could barely walk. After the soldiers left, the survivor emerged and found the family's bodies in the yard, the mother's arms still reaching toward her children.
By October 3, 1944, the SS had killed hundreds of civilians in the smaller villages and hamlets. Now they turned their attention to the main town of Marzabotto itself, which had a population of several thousand people. Many residents had already fled into the mountains after hearing about the massacres in the surrounding villages, but hundreds remained: elderly people unable to travel, families with young children, and those who believed that the larger town would be safer than the isolated hamlets. On October 3rd, SS troops entered Marzabotto and began the same systematic killing operation they had carried out in the other villages. Soldiers went door to door, searching houses and executing anyone they found. Entire families were killed in their homes. The elderly were shot in their beds. Children were dragged from hiding places and executed. One witness who survived by hiding in a cellar later testified, "I heard the soldiers coming down our street, breaking into houses. I heard screaming, then gunshots, then silence. This happened house after house. When they came to our building, I hid under some sacks in the cellar. They searched, but didn't find me. After they left, I went upstairs and found my neighbors dead, an entire family, including a baby." In the town square, SS troops gathered a group of approximately 150 people, men, women, and children who had been pulled from their homes. They were lined up against a wall and machine-gunned. Bodies fell in heaps. Soldiers walked among the corpses, shooting anyone who moved. When the massacre was over, the bodies were left in the square for days before being buried. Churches throughout Marzabotto became sites of particular horror. The Nazis showed no respect for religious sanctuaries. At the Church of San Giovanni Battista, SS troops entered during a service and shot the priest and several elderly women who were praying. At another church, soldiers found a group of refugees sheltering inside and executed them all. By October 5th, the main phase of the massacre was over. The SS troops had accomplished their goal. They had cleansed the Monzuno area of its civilian population. Over 770 people had been killed in Marzabotto alone. In the surrounding villages and hamlets, the death toll exceeded 1,000.
The total number of victims from the entire Monzuno massacre is estimated at 1,830 people. Among the dead were over 200 children aged 10 or younger. The youngest victim was just a few days old. The oldest was 86 years old. Entire families had been wiped out, in some cases 3 or 4 generations killed together. Some family names completely disappeared from the region because every member had been murdered. The few who survived did so by hiding in the mountains, in ditches, or under the bodies of their dead relatives. Many survivors were severely traumatized. Some had watched their entire families being killed. Others had seen unspeakable atrocities. The psychological wounds would last for the rest of their lives. After the killing ended, SS troops looted the villages of everything valuable: money, jewelry, food, livestock, tools. What they couldn't carry, they destroyed. Then they systematically burned every building. Houses, churches, schools, shops, everything was set on fire. The goal was not just to kill the people, but to erase the villages from existence. When Allied forces finally reached the area in late October 1944, they found a landscape of devastation. Entire villages had been reduced to ashes. Bodies lay scattered everywhere, in burned buildings, in streets, in fields, in forests. Many corpses had been partially eaten by animals. The smell of death hung over the entire region. The Allies immediately began documenting the atrocities, taking photographs and collecting testimony from survivors. They quickly realized they had uncovered one of the worst massacres in Western Europe. Italian authorities began the grim task of recovering and identifying bodies. Mass graves were dug to bury the victims. Forensic teams worked for months to identify as many victims as possible, though some bodies were so badly burned or decomposed that identification was impossible.
After World War II ended in 1945, efforts began to bring those responsible for the Marzabotto massacre to justice. Italian authorities compiled lists of suspects, collected evidence, and prepared for war crimes trials. The primary target was SS-Sturmbannführer Walter Reder, who had commanded the operation. However, justice would be delayed for decades. In the immediate post-war period, the Western Allies were focused on prosecuting the top Nazi leaders at Nuremberg. Lower-ranking officers who had committed atrocities in Italy were often overlooked. Additionally, the beginning of the Cold War shifted priorities. Former Nazis were sometimes protected or recruited by Western intelligence agencies to work against the Soviet Union. Walter Reder was eventually captured in Austria in 1948 and extradited to Italy. In 1951, he was tried by an Italian military court and found guilty of war crimes for his role in the Marzabotto massacre and other atrocities. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. However, the trial was controversial. Reder showed no remorse and claimed he was following orders. Many Italians felt that life imprisonment was too lenient for someone who had orchestrated the murder of over 1,800 people. Reder served 32 years in Italian prisons. Throughout his imprisonment, the Austrian government and German advocacy groups campaigned for his release, arguing that he had been following military orders and that he had served enough time. In 1985, after significant diplomatic pressure, the Italian government released Reder on humanitarian grounds due to his advanced age and poor health. He was 71 years old. He returned to Austria, where he lived for another 4 years, dying in 1991 at age 76. The release of Reder caused outrage among survivors and their families. They felt betrayed by the Italian government and believed that justice had been denied. The fact that Reder never expressed remorse or apologized for his actions made his release even more painful. Most of the soldiers who actually carried out the killings at Marzabotto were never prosecuted. Some died during the war. Others returned to Germany or Austria after the war and blended back into civilian society. Their identities remained unknown, and they lived out their lives without facing justice. In 2006, 62 years after the massacre, an Italian military court in La Spezia tried 10 former SS officers in absentia for their roles in the Marzabotto massacre. All 10 were convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment. They were also ordered to pay 100 million euros in compensation to survivors and families of victims. However, none of the convicted men were ever extradited to Italy to serve their sentences. Germany and Austria refused to hand them over, citing various legal technicalities. By the time of the trial, most of the accused were elderly or had already died. This failure to achieve full justice has been a source of ongoing pain for Italian survivors and their descendants. Many feel that Germany has never fully acknowledged or taken responsibility for the atrocities committed in Italy during World War II. The Marzabotto massacre has been memorialized in several ways. The site of the massacres is now a peace park and memorial. The ruins of destroyed villages have been preserved, including the Church of San Martino, which still bears bullet holes and scorch marks from the massacre. A museum documenting the atrocities was established in Marzabotto, featuring photographs, documents, and testimony from survivors. Every year on September 29, ceremonies are held to commemorate the victims. Survivors, their descendants, and Italian officials gather to remember those who died and to recommit to preventing such atrocities. The memorial site has become an important destination for school groups and visitors interested in understanding the reality of Nazi occupation. The Marzabotto massacre remains one of the most important events in Italian World War II history. It represents the extreme brutality of Nazi policies in Italy and the suffering of Italian civilians during the occupation. The massacre is taught in Italian schools as an example of the consequences of fascism and the importance of defending democratic values and human rights. The lessons of Marzabotto are universal. The massacre demonstrates how collective punishment escalates violence and creates cycles of brutality. It shows how ideological fanaticism and dehumanization of the enemy can lead soldiers to commit unspeakable acts against innocent people, including children. And it reminds us that justice delayed is often justice denied. The failure to promptly prosecute war criminals allows perpetrators to escape accountability and denies closure to victims and their families. The 770 people killed in Marzabotto and the 1,000+ killed in surrounding villages were not soldiers or partisans. They were farmers, shopkeepers, priests, mothers, children, and elderly people. They died simply because they lived in an area where partisans operated. Their deaths served no military purpose. They were murdered as collective punishment, as terror, and as a demonstration of Nazi power. Today, as new conflicts rage around the world, and as civilian populations continue to suffer in war zones, the memory of Marzabotto serves as a stark reminder of the cost of targeting civilians. The massacre teaches us that the protection of innocent life must be paramount, that international laws of war must be enforced, and that those who commit atrocities must be held accountable. The victims of Marzabotto deserve to be remembered not as statistics, but as individuals, people with names, families, dreams, and lives that were stolen from them. Their memorial stands as a warning to future generations about the dangers of hatred, the brutality of war, and the preciousness of human life.